Alright, we're going to tie the furry foam crayfish here for you, and that is pretty simple. It's weighted. Even though it's made out of foam, this foam will get wet, and when it gets wet it gets saturated and it sinks just like you want it to. It's pretty simple, and it's kind of an adaptation of different patterns. So there's nothing real original about it, but it gets the job done for sure. So I'll show you how to tie this up. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and get started. The first thing we're going to do is add some weight. This is .025 lead wire, I believe. We're just going to put a bunch of wraps, probably 10 or 12. And that's going to be all toward the eye of the hook, because that will in this case be the back of the fly. And when you're fishing these, you want the head of the fly to be the last thing to sink. Now, a lot of people use dumbbell eyes, and that's kind of what dumbbell eyes would do. They would drag the fly down like that. So now you can start up your thread. Get this all tied down real hard, because it will move on you. And once you dub over top of that, you don't want this lead wire moving around. So you get that nice and tied down, and you're going to bring your thread all the way back past the point of the hook, actually pretty far, because the head actually will go around the bend of the hook. So next thing you're going to need is just your standard pheasant tail, and I'll grab like, let's see here, just kind of a pile of fibers is good. Get them cut off. So that's kind of what you have, is something like that. And that's like the antenna and the mouth parts and whatnot. And I'll extend them pretty far, so you can kind of get them tied down, extending pretty far. If you want to thin them out, you certainly could do that. It doesn't really matter a whole lot. So I'm going to go ahead and trim that off. Get it nice and tied down. And now what we're going to do is take on this furry foam. And here's a piece that I have cut off the original sheet. The original sheet's like $5 or something, I don't know, so it's kind of expensive, but you can make a pile of these out of one of these sheets. I have yet to go through a sheet. So I cut about a ½ inch, about two lengths of the shank long, and I put a point on the end, and that's easier than to loop in. And actually how we're going to do that is tie it in with the point, just kind of catch it in with a loop. The point should face the eye of the hook, and then you can wrap that down all the way, to where you stop tying down the antenna with the pheasant tail there. So once you get that tied down, you can kind of lash it down so it's a little, takes up a little less volume. So there you have that, and then what you're going to do next is tie in the head, and all that is dubbing in a big clump right here, so that when you fold that, it's not flat. You want something up underneath that, so you have a head. So you take some dubbing. Here's some, like, it's just brownish dubbing. Anything will really work, depending on the color of your crayfish and the particular creek that you're fishing. Then you can kind of match the hatch if you want with that. So I'm just going to go ahead. It's not a tight dubbing ball or anything. It's just kind of, you throw some on there to get a nice head build up. And like I said, I'm not even using thread that even matches the color of the dubbing. I'm not worried about that too much. You can't see it. So when you pull that, you get kind of more of a rounded head on there. So that kind of helps. I might even add a little bit more here, just for good measure. And then yeah, I can take that down a little bit. Okay, so now you got your head, and the claws is what would be next. So if you look on this, those are your claws, and that's just kind of your mallard feather. You could use any feather really, but these duck feathers work well. Wood duck, I guess you could use. That would be a little more yellow. And so you cut out the middle, so you have a V. And then you will end up doing this with it. You'll tie it on, let's see how I can get that, like that. But you're never going to end up being able to include all these fibers, so I drag as many forward as possible so that I get a nice V, and then I tie in, and then what doesn't get lashed in I just kind of ditch then. So I'm gonna tie them in about, you know, halfway to the end of the antenna, wherever I left off. So I lash them in, and then they splay out just perfectly like that. You pinch them and then hold them, and once you get a couple tight wraps, then you can go ahead and cut off, you know, this excess here, and then you can make sure it's nice and secure. So now you have your claws and you have your head. So you can pull this furry foam over, and that will ensure that the claws are split. You can see that. So you're going to pull that foam over, and you're going to tie it down right where you ended the dubbing ball for your head. And it's okay to have to leave a little slack in the foam for the head, so it's nice and round. So you got one joint there, it's kind of a segment. Let me adjust this here. Okay. And so now the body of a regular crayfish is going to taper from wide at the head to thin at the back. And there are going to be some legs, so we're going to use a grizzly hackle for that. You could probably use brown, anything would really work. But we're going to dub in between that. So first we're going to tie on our grizzly hackle so that we're ready to wrap that forward. And I'm actually going to tie it on, I'm not going to tie it on right next to the foam. I'm going to leave a little space because the legs aren't necessarily the whole length of the body, and it's not necessarily necessary to wrap that the whole way. So I'm going to bring my thread back to where that foam is, and I'm going to add some more dubbing. And like I said, I'm not making a real thin dubbing rope. It's more loose and puffy so that you get a lot of bulk out of it. And then right before I get to that feather, I'll pull the foam down to where you want it, do one nice loose wrap, get it positioned, and then you can cinch down so that way you have the segment where you want it. So here's then where I'm going to add the legs, and I am going to want actually another segment in between here and the end of the eye of the hook, so you can see what it's starting to look like. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to dub about halfway. I got my dubbing. I'm going to dub about halfway, and now I'm going to drag some hackle through that for legs. You don't have to. It doesn't have to be real dense. So I'm going to tie it off actually, but not cutting it off. So I'm going to tie it off halfway. I'm going to bring my furry foam segment over. I'm going to make sure that it's where I want it. And it is. So then it's going to look something like that. So once I have that, I will just tie my thread down, and I'll repeat the process basically, and add some dubbing to right before the eye of the hook, and then I will continue the legs just a little bit further, maybe one or two wraps. And now I'll tie it off again for the second time. It helps, I didn't hear, but it helps to leave a little space at the eye of the hook. So what I'll do there is I'll just take my fingers, pull that back, and run the material back just a little bit. Cut off the end, and then you can do your last segment. And I like to pull the legs back before I get that loose wrap in there for the end segment. Once I have that where I want it, I can pull that down and do 2-3 wraps there. And then what you have is the tail. This is the tail, is going to go way out over the eye of the hook, and we will trim that. but you want to tie off underneath that so you can expose the eye of the hook. And if you leave yourself enough room, which it's been a while since I made one of these last year, so you tie off in there. I will use a whip finisher probably for that. You can use your hands to make one, whatever works for you. So I'll put in a couple wraps up underneath there, tie that off. So now you have this, long tail. Let's see if I can bend this back. Okay. So you have this tail, and I'm actually at this point going to take it out of the vise, and I will trim that right like that, and I'll trim that just kind of at an angle. So you got something like that then for the tail. So that's the completed tying of the fly. So you can see he's got the legs in the back, you got your claws, your antenna, and your furry foam. But that is the tying. You can decorate these as much as you like, whether it makes a difference to the fish or not. Sharpies will do wonders on these, so I'll show you how we can do that. I'll put it back in the vise. And you can trim these to suit any of your needs. That's what's nice. Okay, so the eyes on a crayfish, a lot of people like them to stick out. I don't know if the bass are looking for eyes or not, but if they are, this foam you can write on pretty good. I'll just hold my marker off to the side here. I'll show you then how this works. You just kind of poke the point of your marker there, and you hold it for briefly, and then you'll get these eyes. So that will look cool to you as the fisherman. It probably won't make much of a difference to the bass, but so you have this orange color, but if you want to mix in some dull colors, you can definitely add green. Here's a dark green. I'll add that. So you can color that up if you got the olive colored crayfish. Don't press down too hard on this foam because these markers kind of deteriorate the foam until it dries. So you can make that olive color. You can take a red if you want. You can take a little red and add some red fringes to the tail. That's at this point it's more for the fishermen here than anything else. I mean, they're not going to be that detail oriented, I don't think, but there you have it. That will absolutely catch smallmouth, and it is weighted, so it'll drag right above the bottom, and they'll pick that up. Smallmouth will definitely hit that. So tie up a couple of these. If you have any modifications, definitely post on here what you changed about it, because there's obviously ways to improve this and even make it easier to tie. So give it a try.